All right, hello, welcome to Getting Started with Angular and ASP.NET Core 2.0. My name is Jason Taylor and I'm an SSW solution architect. I've been developing software now for over 17 years and I've found that the most important principle is KISS, or keep it simple, stupid. This principle states that systems should be kept simple rather than made complicated. So I use this principle to guide my development efforts in that I'm always looking for the simplest solution to any given problem. And today I'm going to show you the simplest solution to building ASP.NET Core 2.0 apps with Angular. So keeping it simple is not always easy. It's actually really hard, and when I first write my code, it's garbage, absolute garbage. I have to do a number of iterations to actually get it to a point where I think it's actually useful. Now, in May 2012 of 2016, I thought I found the simple solution to building single-page apps with Angular and ASP.NET Core, but I was wrong. And I should have known that I was wrong at that point because I actually wrote this quick start. And I called it a quick start, but I probably should have reviewed that title because this quick start actually had many steps. For example, before you even get started, you needed to follow a prerequisites. And if you didn't meet the prerequisites, you couldn't do it. So you had to start here. So first you'd install Node.js. Then you'd upgrade NPM. And like on a Mac, that's really easy, right? Because it's all just gravy. But on a Windows machine, it's really hard work. So you have to follow all of these steps.
I was doing this yesterday.
You did this yesterday? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to show you a much easier way. So then you install TypeScript, then you install Git, then you install Visual Studio Code, then you test your development environment. Now we can do the quick start. Let's have a look at the quick start. So we've got to do some scaffolding. So we have to install Yarn and some templates. And then we have to configure TypeScript some more. And then we have to do installing our client dependencies in our quick start. And then we have to configure ASP.NET Core really quick. And then we had to do this, completing the application. And this is everything that didn't actually fit under another heading in the quick start. And then we're good to go. So yeah. Apologies, that was not really a quick start. Keeping things simple is hard, and the first thing you come up with, don't expect it to be the simplest solution. You're going to need to take a few cuts at it, and right now I think I have found the simplest solution. So how do we do it? We use ASP.NET Core JavaScript Services, and that basically provides built-in support for building single-page applications with ASP.NET Core. It supports all major client-side frameworks. Today we're interested in Angular, but when you use this approach, you can also build applications with React or Aurelia or Vue. Anyone here used Aurelia? Yeah, not many people. There's one group I went to, there was 3 people that built with Aurelia, and that accounted for about 30% of all Aurelia developers. It was crazy, in one room, right? Just ridiculous. So the cool thing about this approach is it's cross-platform. So you can use your favorite OS and you can use your favorite IDE. So I did a funny example where I actually used this approach using the Windows command prompt and Notepad, and it works just fine. So go ahead and use the Windows command prompt and Notepad if you want to. Don't be ashamed, just run with it. Prerequisites are really simple. You just need Node and the .NET Core SDK. Now, those two things are useful if you're, say, building on Linux or Mac OS or Raspberry Pi. Those two things are what you need. If you're building on Windows and you like Visual Studio 2017, then that's all you need. If you're building on Windows and you prefer to use Visual Studio Code, then just grab Visual Studio Code and the .NET Core SDK, and you'll have it covered. So if you're using Visual Studio 2017, all you need to do is go File, New Project, select .NET Core, and select an ASP.NET Core web application. Now when you click OK on that, it'll take you to this screen, and you have 3 choices for a single page application. You can choose Angular, React, or React plus Redux. So that's what you get out of the box. Now if you're using the .NET Core CLI, whether it's command prompt or terminal or PowerShell, you can find out what projects you can create by running .NET New or .NET New list, and it'll show you those 3 templates out of the box. So you don't need to install anything extra, it's just good to go. And then if you're using Angular plus ASP.NET Core, now this is the simple approach. This is what I've learned since May 12, 2016. Everything that I showed you in those 2 blog posts is replaced with this. I spent a lot of time writing those blog posts, but really I should have just wrote a tweet, .NET new Angular, because it's the same thing. So let's have a look.
Did it provide you a lot of benefit understanding?
Of course, yeah. To follow that process, I had to learn a lot about TypeScript and NPM and all of the tools and supporting processes. So when you use this approach, it's really simple, and you can start creating your app just by going .NET new Angular, but you still have a bit to learn. But it's definitely the fastest way to get up and running.
What's an example when you're working with another developer that you have benefit understanding what's going on underneath the covers them?
So what's a benefit when you're using this approach and you're working with another developer? Well, I would say that if you're looking to build Angular and ASP.NET Core apps together and you run .NET new Angular, it gives you a project that you can use as a reference to understand how those 2 technologies fit together. So that's a fairly large benefit. All right, so demonstration time. So let me zoom in a little bit. Let's have a look. So I'm not traditionally a command prompt developer. I like to actually develop using Visual Studio. So there's a couple of things that I do to prepare myself whenever I jump into a command prompt. And I learned this from Troy Hunt. He's a security expert. So the first thing I do is change my color to green, because you can't hack unless you've got a green terminal. Okay, so it's got to be green. You also have to hide your prompt. So you guys can see where I am right now. But if I type this command, $G space, now my command prompt is hidden. So anyone looking over my shoulder like this guy doesn't know where I am. I can still see where I am, but I've got to go like this and then quickly clear it again. So it's fine. So let's jump in. I've got a Northwind temp folder. Now this is a empty folder. So as you can see, and what we're going to do is we're just going to type .NET new Angular. And you're going to see that with these 3 magic words, it's going to do everything that we need to build that app. Angular and ASP.NET Core working in perfect harmony. Yes?
Are you joking? Why don't you want to know where you are?
No, I'm not joking. He's always looking over my shoulder. It's ridiculous. He's like, yeah, it's just crazy. Tiago's pretty bad too, but not as bad as this guy. Really shifty. Yeah.
We can see it now, clearly.
What? So you're bad too? Okay, so now I have 3 guys to worry about. My gosh. Okay, so you can see what it did there was it built the new application. We've got all the files that we need, and I'm going to show you those in a second. And it actually restored all of the NuGet dependencies, which is something that ASP.NET requires. So you have your NPM dependencies, which are your client side, and then you have your NuGet dependencies, which are your server side. So it's done that for us. So all we have to do is run npm install. So if I run that now, that'd be a mistake because we'd be here for like 10 years. So I'm going to switch to another application where I've already actually run it. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. And a really nice little tip is that when you want to launch Visual Studio Code in your current directory and load that solution, you can just run code dot, which is cool. So we do that. Now we can go into Visual Studio Code, and I'll zoom in. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Where is it? There it is. Okay, can you see that okay? Is that text big enough?
Yeah, could be better.
Could be better? Is that better? Okay, great. So what I want you to take note of here is this tree structure. Let me see. There we go. Duncan told me that I had to do this today, and so I'm doing this today as promised. Let me try it. It's very weird, but you can see it. Okay, so you can see here we've got our client app, and that contains all of our client-side files. So that's the separation from the server side. If you look here, if you know ASP.NET MVC, we've got our controllers. So you can see that's where our ASP.NET controllers are, typically our web API. And then we've got our view. So we're going to use an initial view on the server side to launch our Angular application. And then we've got our www root, which is where all our build will go. And if you look down here, we've got all of our different client-side files. So there's our package.json for our npm dependencies, our TypeScript config, and our webpack configuration. So we've got two webpack configurations there. And we've got one for our stuff, the things that we're building, and we've got one for the third-party dependencies. And that makes the builds really efficient because it's not rebuilding all of those third-party dependencies all the time. Question?
Just that client app folder.
Yes.
Could you expand upon?
We definitely should expand that.
Go through controllers, I understand what goes with views, but
Fantastic.
we go through
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the client app contains all of our Angular files. So you can see here, we've got our app folder, which is where all our code lives, and we've got a components folder. So you can see that we've got a counter component, a fetch data component, a home component, and an add menu component. But even better than that, let's launch this so that we can see how it works. Now to launch this from the command prompt, we can just go .NET run. Simple as that. So what that will do is it'll launch Kestrel, which is the web server that ASP.NET Core is built to run on. And Kestrel's very fast. We only have to launch one process. We don't need to launch a separate process for our Angular client side. It takes care of both of those things for us. So now if we control click on localhost 5000, it'll fire up this application.
So, sorry, does the client app then replace parts of the view processes? Because in the view you normally have your HTML or Razor files and all that sort of stuff. So how does that...
So the client app is responsible for everything on the client.
Okay.
Yes. So let's have a look at some of these features. I'm going to zoom in here. So this is what you get out of the box. Whether you're doing it with Angular or one of the other client-side technologies, you have this template, which basically provides everything that you need to know about the template, plus some examples to help you get started. So you can see here, it tells you what it's built on. It's built on ASP.NET Core C#. It uses Angular, TypeScript, Webpack, and Bootstrap. And then it tells you about the features. And so we should have a look at all of these features now. But firstly, there's client-side navigation, and that provides a really nice experience between the server-side and client-side. So it understands the server-side routes, and it understands the client-side routes. We'll have a look at how that works. Then we have server-side pre-rendering, and that's a really great feature too. What it does is it takes the server, runs Node.js, spins Node.js up on the server, and actually pre-compiles the application view, the view that you've requested, say the home page, and sends it back to the client. And the reason that it does that is it does it really fast. Much faster than if you were just sending it back to the client and letting the client do its thing to spin it up. So the user gets a really nice initial load, and that gives them confidence in your application. They can see that they don't have to wait a few seconds. They wait, say, 100 milliseconds, and they see the page. So that gives them great confidence that it's a quality application. Next, we have the Webpack Dev middleware and the hot module replacement. Those are my two favorite features. That's one of the reasons why this is the simplest approach. When you're developing with this template, you basically can make changes to your client side, and it will automatically push those changes through to the browser. I'm going to show you. You don't even need to press F5. You'll be able to see those changes instantly, so it's very cool. And finally, you get efficient production builds, and that's when we've got the separation between those two Webpack configurations. We've got the third party separated from the stuff that we're building. So let's have a look. If we are to make a change to this application, say we wanted to just change that Northwind title to say Northwind Spa, what I would actually have to do is I'd have to stop Kestrel. Then I would have to make the change, save the file, and then I would have to run Webpack, and then I'd have to restart Kestrel. And that's really painful. Sometimes I do that if I'm feeling like annoying the audience a little bit. I don't feel like annoying you guys today because you guys seem really cool, so I'm not going to do that. what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable Webpack Dev middleware so that we can see how that change can happen instantly. So if I kill that and go to startup, everything that we do is in startup. So I'll make that nice and big for you guys. You can see here's Webpack Dev middleware. And if I uncomment that, I've got Webpack Dev middleware enabled. Now I can launch my application. Whoops. Again, .NET. Oh. .NET run. And that's going to start with Webpack Dev middleware. So now when I make a change to a client-side file, Webpack's going to automatically run on in the background. So let's have a look. So I just want to change Northwind to Northwind Spa just to keep it simple. I like to keep things simple. I don't know if you know that about me. There we go. So we're going to do that. Now just before, I'll do a quick refresh so we can make sure everything's good. Good. Save my changes. And you can see down the bottom here that it's picked up the changes. It's a little bit hard to see, it's quite small. But if I refresh now, we should see Northwind Spa. So that's the experience that we get with Webpack Dev middleware just by itself. We didn't actually have to restart Kestrel and run Webpack manually, so that's nice. But it's not the ultimate experience. The ultimate experience would be that we didn't have to actually refresh. So if I actually enable hot module replacement, that's the experience that we get. So if I go back to startup, and we uncomment this, so this is just a property on Webpack Dev middleware. Save those changes, and now I can go ahead and restart it again, and we have hot module replacement enabled. So now, when we make a change to a client-side file, Webpack Dev middleware will run, and it will build my client-side resources so that they're available. But then hot module replacement will actually inject those changes directly into the browser so that it's just going to appear magically. I don't have to refresh anymore. So let's have a look at that. I'll change something different. Change some styles. Make that big. We'll put that beside. I just want to zoom out here. There we go. Now what we need to do is just make sure that hot module replacement's running. If we just fire up the console, press Control F5, we just want to see HMR connected appear in the console once it's finished refreshing. There we go, so HMR connected, so we're good to go. So let's make some changes. I'm going to make some random changes, just a random color. Save, and what happens? Magic. So that's all I did. I saved my changes. You could see hot module replacement kicked in, rebuilt those changes appeared automatically in the browser. I didn't have to do anything. So that's a pretty cool experience. But what about our server-side experience? What if we make a change to a server-side file? Can we have that experience? So we've got this fetch data system, this component, and what it does is it goes back to the server and it just gets 10 weather records. And if I change that to 5, I'd actually have to still stop Kestrel, rebuild my application and restart Kestrel, and that's painful. I don't want to do that on the server side either. I want my client side and my server side stuff to happen magically. So we can do that, and we can do that by just adding in a simple extension. And that is this extension here. So this is a NuGet package from Microsoft.NET Watcher Tools. And by installing this, instead of going .NET Run, we can type .NET Watch Run, and it will monitor our server-side files so we get that same experience. So let's have a look. Okay, so .NET, watch, run, just like that. Wait for it to spin up. And it's basically doing the same thing. It's going to launch Kestrel, and it'll tell us that it's ready, and then we can change our server-side file. So, if we go to our controllers, we've got a sample data controller, and it's just generating some random data. You can see here it's generating 10 records. I'm going to change it to 5. And now, when I save the changes, watch what happens in the console. It recognizes that there's been a change to a server-side file, and it automatically restarts Kestrel. So it builds the application, restarts Kestrel. So those changes are available in the browser as soon as it's finished with that process. So it's not as quick as hot module replacement, obviously. However, it is quicker than me doing it manually. So I don't have to worry about that. I can just let that tick along in the background. So let's have a look. It's finished. If I jump over here, I'll just navigate away, navigate back, and now we just have 5 records. So I didn't have to do anything. And that means that I've got the simplest development experience for building these types of applications. I can just build my application. I don't have to worry about changes on the client side. I don't have to run any client-side processes. I can change my server side. I don't have to worry about any server-side processes. I can just build it. Pretty simple. So let's have a look at some of the other features that are great about this. One of the features that we've got is the client-side navigation. So the client-side navigation basically means that when you're navigating between client-side paths, which are handled by Angular, it doesn't make a server-side request. So you can see when I navigate from home to counter and back again, there's no server-side requests that are appearing in this network monitoring window. However, if I actually went to the address bar and press enter, it does make a server-side request. However, because I've disabled the feature for client-side navigation, it doesn't find anything. It fails to load that request. So I think what we see here, which is hidden at the moment, is a 404. So what we need to do is enable the feature for the client-side routing. So that's done in startup. So if I load up startup.cs, and I just scroll down a little bit, there's this map spa fallback route. And that's where the magic happens. And this is something that we would have to do ourselves if we were taking a different approach. So if I save that, oh look, it's detected the change, that's cool. So we've changed startup, it's detected the change, and it's going to restart my application. So now it's going to handle the routes in 3 ways. If it's a static file, it's just going to return that directly from Kestrel. If it matches an MVC route, it'll return the MVC route. So a request to home index is going to return it from MVC. And then if it doesn't match any of that, it's basically going to say, I don't know how to handle this. I'm going to pass it back to the client, and maybe the client can figure out. And that's exactly what happens when we make a request to home counter. We press this, it goes to the server says, I don't understand what this route is. I'm going to pass it to the client, and actually Angular does understand what this route is, so it just loads it straight up for us. So we have really nice integration between those 2 features, server-side and client-side navigation. So what else have we got? We've got server-side pre-rendering. Best way to demonstrate that is actually to disable JavaScript. So as I mentioned before, with server-side pre-rendering turned on, it actually creates a version of the page that's been requested on the server side and returns it to the client, and it does it ultra fast. So with JavaScript disabled and server-side pre-rendering not yet enabled, we get this, because without JavaScript our application can't run, okay? But if I quickly turn on server-side pre-rendering, which is really simple to do, we just go to our MVC index view, and you can see that I've got this tag helper, ASP pre-render module, and that enables server-side pre-rendering. Now if I make that request again, with JavaScript disabled, it still loads the app, which is pretty amazing. Now you might be thinking, that's great, now I can run my apps without JavaScript, because Brendan doesn't really like JavaScript, but it doesn't quite work that way. It actually doesn't include the full functionality of your application. So you can see I'm incrementing here and nothing's happening. If I go to my fetch data, I still get my data back because that's all happening on the server anyway, so it's pre-rendered that, but my Angular stuff hasn't kicked in. So what happens is on the server side, it uses a main server file to do the pre-rendering, and then on the client side, it expects to load the main client, which would then bring in the rest of our functionality. So that way we get the really fast initial rendering, and then the client app can function normally. So if I enable JavaScript again, that's exactly how it'll work. So we can go over to our counter, increment, all good. So that's it. Those are the main features that make this template really simple and really easy to use. Okay, so in summary, what I've shown you today is creating a SPA using the .NET Core CLI. All you need to remember is .NET New Angular. It supports very efficient server and client-side navigation. It uses webpack dev middleware, hot module replacement, and you can get a really nice experience with the server side as well by using the .NET Core Watcher tool. Thank you.